village of Eldermoor was known for its tranquil pace and timeless charm. Nestled among misty hills and surrounded by whispering woods, it was the sort of place where time seemed to slow down, where neighbors still greeted each other by name, and where secrets slept soundly. Under roofs made of slate and sorrow. But lately, something had disturbed that silence. At odd hours of the night, a chilling sound echoed through the cobbled lanes of Eldermoor. It was the laugh of a woman, shrill, broken, and eerily childlike. No one knew exactly where it came from, but most suspected the old Linden house on the eastern edge of town. The house stood alone, veiled in ivy and shadow. Windows boarded, garden overgrown, roof sagging from decades of neglect. Children would dare each other to approach the rusted gate, only to run away squealing when the wind creaked through the broken shutters. Linden House hadn't been lived in, or so people thought, for over 20 years. Once, it belonged to a stern man named Reginald Barn and his quiet wife, Edith. They had a daughter, or so the rumors went. Few people had ever seen her. Some claimed she had died young. Others said she had been sent away to a hospital. But there was one story, passed in hushed tones over evening fires, that said she had never left at all. They said she was still there, hidden beneath the floorboards, in a locked room that only her father had the key to. The sound of laughter was the first sign, but not the last. One night, Harold the baker swore he saw a pale face peering from the top window, eyes gleaming in the moonlight like glass. Another time, young Emily Cobb ran past the house on her way from school and heard someone whisper her name through the hedgerow. Emperle, the voice was faint but unmistakable, like breath through teeth. The townspeople tried to rationalize it. Perhaps the wind, they said. Or some stray animal. But in their hearts, they felt the weight of a truth they didn't dare admit. Something was in that house. And it was awake. But of all the people in Eldermoor, none knew the truth better than Jonah Carrick. Now a man in his late 30s, Jonah had returned to the village after nearly 2 decades in the city. Time had creased his eyes and silvered the edges of his beard, but he still carried the same quiet demeanor he had as a boy. When he arrived, he rented a room above the tavern and kept mostly to himself. But late one evening, after several cups of strong cider, he began to speak. Not loudly, not to everyone, but to a few old friends who still remembered the summers of their youth. He told them he had once lived in Linden House. He had stayed there the summer he turned 14, when his parents left him in the care of his great-uncle Reginald and great-aunt Edith while they traveled abroad. At first, the house had seemed vast and quiet, filled with dusty furniture and the ticking of antique clocks. Reginald was cold but polite. Edith was warm but distant, as if her thoughts wandered elsewhere. Neither spoke much about the house's history or about the locked door at the bottom of the staircase leading to the cellar. But Jonah remembered the dreams. He dreamed of footsteps in the hall, even though the floorboards never creaked under his own feet. He dreamed of laughter, soft at first, then louder, until it became shrieks that clawed their way into his ears. And always, he would wake up with the feeling that someone had been watching him, someone just outside the bedroom door. One day, curiosity got the better of him. While Reginald was away and Edith napped in the parlor, Jonah snuck down to the cellar. He remembered the dust, the cobwebs, the scent of mold and iron. At the far end, behind shelves of old boxes and tools, stood a metal door with bolts and a heavy lock. It was from behind that door that he heard it. A voice. Faint, but clear. Soft and pleading. Jonah. He froze. His heart pounded so hard it hurt his ribs. Jonah, please. It was the voice of a girl. He ran. That night, he asked Edith who lived down there. Her face went pale. She told him he must never go to the cellar again. That it was dangerous. That there were traps and sharp tools and rotten floorboards. Her hands shook as she spoke, and Jonah noticed, for the first time, how often she looked toward the cellar door as if expecting someone to come through it. Jonah never returned to Linden House after that summer. His parents came home, and he left with them, never speaking of what he'd heard. But the voice stayed with him. And now, 20 years later, he had returned to Eldermoor with a purpose. He planned to go back. To open the door. To find the girl whose voice still haunted his dreams. But what Jonah didn't know, what none of the villagers knew, was that the laughter was just the beginning. Something else stirred beneath the floorboards of Linden House. And it was waiting for him. The next morning, Eldermoor was blanketed in a thick fog. The kind that muffled footsteps and swallowed whole streets. Jonah stood before the rusted gate of Linden House, his breath visible in the cold morning air, heart pounding in slow, deliberate thuds. The gate creaked open with a reluctant groan. Everything about the house seemed older than it should be. The brick was cracked and discolored with time, ivy-like veins climbing up its spine. Shutters hung crooked. Moss grew between the cobbles of the front path. The air smelled like earth, wood rot, and something fainter, something sweet, almost perfumed, like dried lavender and decayed memories. He hadn't been here in 20 years, and yet everything was exactly as he remembered. He reached into his coat pocket and took out the old key Edith had mailed to him just before her death last winter. No note. No instructions. Just the key. The front door groaned open slowly, revealing a hallway cloaked in shadows. The silence inside was oppressive. His boots echoed on the wooden floorboards as he stepped in, every creak like a whisper. He paused at the foot of the grand staircase. On the wall above it hung a faded family portrait, Reginald in his gray suit, stern and upright, Edith, delicate and ghost-like in a pale blue dress. And between them, barely visible, a young girl with dark curls and hollow eyes. Jonah shivered. The drawing room was untouched. Furniture covered in white sheets, the fireplace choked with ash and cobwebs. Dust motes drifted through the air, dancing in beams of light that broke through cracks in the shutters. As he moved deeper into the house, the memories came flooding back. The ticking grandfather clock that never chimed. The smell of cinnamon and burning candles. The sound of something scraping behind the walls at night. He made his way to the cellar door. The handle was cold, almost frozen to the touch. He turned it slowly. Locked. He pulled out the key. But before he could slide it into the lock, a noise echoed down the hall behind him. Tap. 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 It was faint like fingernails on glass. He turned. Nothing. Probably just the wind, he muttered, though the air was still. With a deep breath, he fit the key into the lock and turned. Click. The door groaned open. Darkness spilled out like ink. He flicked on his flashlight and stepped onto the first step. The wooden stairs creaked under his weight, the beam of light revealing stone walls, old shelves, rusted tools, and drawings. Dozens of drawings pinned to the walls done in crayon, marker, and charcoal. Some were of flowers and animals, others of screaming mouths, twisted faces, and weeping eyes. Jonah swallowed hard. He descended. At the end of the cellar stood the same steel door he remembered, still bolted shut. He approached cautiously, running his fingers over the cold metal. That's when he saw it. A message, scratched into the door with something sharp. Don't open it. She's not alone. Jonah stumbled back, flashlight trembling in his grip. Then he heard it. Laughter. Soft. Giggling. Right behind him. He turned around, but no one was there. The air grew colder. A sudden chill seeped into his bones. Then, the sound of footsteps. Upstairs. Above his head. Not the slow creak of the house settling. These were fast. Barefoot. Running. Tap 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 tap. Jonah bolted back up the stairs, breath ragged, eyes wide. He burst into the hallway, only to find the upstairs corridor cloaked in silence once more. The portrait above the stairs now hung crooked, swinging slightly, though there was no breeze. He walked slowly toward the staircase, heart thudding like a war drum. The upper floor loomed like a shadow over him. Then he noticed something new. On the wallpaper at the base of the staircase, a fresh handprint. Small. Red. Like blood. He reached out to touch it, but before his fingers could make contact, a voice drifted down from the upper floor. Jonah. You came back. It was the voice of a girl. Soft. Familiar. But beneath it, he heard another voice. Fainter. Crooked. Like words being dragged across a jagged surface. He's mine now. Jonah stumbled back, breath stolen from his lungs. and that was when the lights flickered and died. Darkness swallowed the hallway in an instant. Jonah stood frozen, heart racing in the pitch black. He couldn't even hear the house settling anymore. Just silence, complete and unnatural, as if the entire building was holding its breath. Slowly, he pulled out his phone, tapping at the screen. No signal. No light. The battery, full that morning, was inexplicably dead. Then, from upstairs, came the creak of a single footstep. Jonah turned toward the staircase, barely able to see its outline in the gloom. The heavy air pressed against his chest. He took a cautious step forward, and then another, listening intently. Nothing. Then, a whisper. Jonah. I'm still here. He felt it, rather than heard it, a breath against his ear. He whirled around, flashlight raised, but there was no one behind him. His hand trembled, cold sweat collecting at the back of his neck. He needed to leave. He moved quickly toward the door, but something stopped him. A sound. A low hum, almost like a lullaby, drifting up from the cellar. It was gentle, melodic, and hauntingly familiar. He turned back toward the cellar. That was the song. The one he used to hear through the floorboards when he was 14. He had always thought he was imagining it. But now he remembered the tune perfectly. It was real. It had always been real. And it was coming from behind the bolted door. Jonah returned to the cellar with heavy steps, the wooden stairs groaning beneath him. The air grew colder as he descended. When he reached the bottom, the drawings still lined the walls, more disturbing now than before. Some looked fresh, too fresh. The crayon still waxy. The paper unstained by age. The steel door stood silent. He ran his fingers across the bolt. Don't open it. She's not alone. The warning echoed in his head, but so did the voice. I'm still here. He slid the bolt back. The sound alone sent shivers up his spine. The lock clicked. The door creaked inward. The room beyond was surprisingly clean, its walls covered in more drawings, hundreds of them, forming a chaotic mural of color and shadows. In the center of the room sat a small wooden bed, neatly made. A single teddy bear rested on the pillow. And on the floor, facing the far wall, was a figure. A girl. She sat cross-legged, her long black hair hanging like a curtain around her face. She wore a white nightgown, too large for her frame, its hem frayed. Her skin was pale, almost blue. Her fingernails scraped absent-mindedly against the floorboards as she rocked back and forth. Hello, Jonah said, his voice cracking. The girl froze. Slowly, she turned her head. Her eyes were the first thing he noticed, huge, dark, and bottomless, as though they had seen far too much for a child. Her mouth curled into a slow, eerie smile. I knew you'd come back, she said softly. Jonah swallowed. Who? Who are you? She tilted her head. Don't you remember me? He shook his head slowly. I'm Illyra, she whispered. We used to play hide and seek through the walls. I watched you while you slept. Jonah stepped back, blood draining from his face. That was you. Illyra nodded. You were the only one who ever heard me. He couldn't breathe. But they locked me in here, she said, rising to her feet. Her movement was slow and strange, as if she wasn't entirely used to standing anymore. They said I was dangerous. She took a step toward him. They were right. Jonah backed up to the doorway. I didn't know. I was just a boy. I waited for you, she said, her voice trembling with a strange mix of sadness and rage. I drew pictures of you. I sang to you. I kept the others away. What others? Her smile faded. The ones in the walls, she whispered. They talked to me. They told me things. Showed me how to get out. But I didn't. I stayed. Her voice dropped lower. Because I knew you'd come back. Suddenly, her expression changed. Her eyes darted to the corner of the room. Jonah followed her gaze and saw shadows moving where no light should reach. Illyra, he whispered. What's in here with you? She didn't answer. The air grew colder still, their breath now visible. Then, the door slammed shut behind him. Jonah rushed to it, yanking at the handle. It wouldn't budge. From the walls, the drawings began to peel away, fluttering to the floor like dead leaves. Beneath them were symbols carved deep into the stone, glowing faintly red. They pulsed like a heartbeat. He turned back to Illyra. She was no longer alone. From the corners of the room, tall, faceless figures emerged, humanoid, but wrong. Their limbs too long, their movements jerky. They didn't walk, they glided. And they were coming for him. Illyra, help me. But the girl was no longer a girl. Her hair writhed like snakes. Her eyes glowed white. Her smile was far too wide. You shouldn't have opened the door, she whispered. The air inside the locked room had changed. It wasn't just cold anymore, it was heavy. As if the atmosphere itself had turned into molasses, resisting Jonah's every movement. He pressed both palms against the door, desperate to push it open, but it wouldn't budge. His breath fogged in the stale, icy air. Behind him, the inhuman figures stood still, watching. Waiting. Illyra, Jonah said again, his voice almost a plea. Please. I don't know what you've become, but I want to help. Her glowing eyes narrowed. Help. She echoed. Where was your help when I screamed through the floorboards? When I begged to be let out? When I scratched my nails bloody trying to claw through the stone? Jonah's throat tightened. He had no answer. I waited every night, she continued, her voice rising. For someone to come. For someone to remember I existed. But they locked the door and forgot me. I didn't forget, Jonah whispered. I ran. I was terrified, but I remembered. Every day. Something flickered behind Illyra's eerie glow. A tremble in her hands. A child's sorrow behind the vengeful shell. But the other figures moved forward. Jonah stumbled backward until his back hit the door again. They surrounded Illyra but didn't touch her. Instead, they formed a loose circle, as if protecting or controlling her. One of them leaned in close to her ear and whispered something too low for Jonah to hear. She nodded. Then, with a single motion, she turned away and pointed at the far wall. Look, she said. Look at what they did to me. Jonah turned his flashlight toward the wall she indicated. It was covered in carvings, marks not made by child's hands, but etched deeply with knives or broken tools. Names. Dozens of them. Dates. Symbols. One name in particular caught his eye, carved deeper than the rest. Catherine Illyra Varn. 1989. Below it, containment successful. Do not open. The others, he realized, were names of other children. Or perhaps not children at all. Some names he vaguely recognized from old stories, kids who went missing, presumed runaways. But their names were here. All of them. Trapped. Documented. Forgotten. What is this place? He muttered. Illyra's voice echoed behind him. It's a vault, she said. Our family made it. For those who were too dangerous to be understood. I wasn't the first. But I was the last. Jonah spun around. Why you? She didn't answer. Instead, she slowly lifted her right hand. The flesh was cracked, bruised. But in her palm pulsed a strange mark like a scar burned into her skin. A perfect spiral. As she raised it, the air rippled around her, and the wall behind her began to distort, as though reality itself were bending. They called it the spiral mark, she said softly. It appeared when I turned 12. The same day I stopped dreaming like other children. I started seeing. Seeing what? The spaces between, she whispered. The thin places, where the veil between this world and the next tears. Jonah stared, cold dread creeping into his bones. My father tried to help at first. But when the others began visiting me, the shadow things, he grew afraid. Then he became cruel. He locked me in here, thinking the stone would protect the world from me, or me from it. Illyra, he started, but the lights flickered again. The walls vibrated with a low hum. The shadows twitched in unison, turning their featureless faces toward the spiral on Illyra's palm. They began chanting, not in words Jonah recognized, but in guttural tones that reverberated in his bones. They're trying to use me, she hissed. Again. They want me to open it. The gate. Jonah's heart pounded. What gate? But she was shaking now, her eyes wide, her jaw clenched. They've waited so long, centuries. Feeding on the forgotten. Whispering to children who hear things they shouldn't. And now you've unlocked the seal. I didn't know. But you did, she snapped. Part of you always knew. Suddenly, a high-pitched shriek tore through the room. One of the shadow creatures lunged at Jonah, its fingers stretching like tendrils. He ducked, the tendrils missing him by inches as they struck the wall, leaving black scorch marks. Illyra, you have to stop them. I don't control them anymore, she said quietly. The room began to shake violently. Dust fell from the ceiling, and from the glowing carvings on the wall, a new figure began to emerge, like stone carving itself into form. It was huge, skeletal, with dozens of eyes and rows of teeth that didn't belong in any earthly mouth. The shadows were summoning something. Illyra, please. You don't have to be part of this. She turned to him. And for the first time, he saw not the monstrous figure she had become, but the frightened girl she had once been. I remember you, she whispered. You brought me cookies through the floor when they thought I was asleep. You read to me through the vents. Tears welled in Jonah's eyes. I never stopped thinking about you, he said. For a moment, the chanting paused. Then Illyra screamed. Run. She threw out her arms, and a wave of white-hot light burst from her spiral-marked palm, slamming into the shadows. They howled and reeled back, screeching in pain. The wall cracked behind Jonah, the stone splitting like paper. He turned and saw daylight a way out. Illyra, come with me. He shouted. She shook her head. They won't let me. But you can still stop this. You have to seal the door. From the other side. I won't leave you. You already did once, she said, smiling sadly. Now make it count. Jonah hesitated but then nodded. He sprinted for the breach, the ground shaking violently beneath him. As he leapt through the gap, the entire cellar exploded in blinding light. And then silence. Jonah stumbled out of the breach and fell onto the damp earth behind Linden House, gasping for air. The grass was wet with dew and streaked with ash. When he looked back, the stone wall of the house had sealed itself. No trace of the rupture remained. No light, no sound. Just a cold, gray wall, silent and unmoving. Illyra. Her name echoed in his mind like a fading melody. He waited. Listened. But the house was mute. Then, for the first time in hours, Jonah realized how exhausted he was. Every muscle in his body trembled. His skin felt bruised, and his hands were scraped raw. He pulled himself to his feet and staggered through the backyard gate, back into the quiet streets of Eldermoor. But the village had changed. There were no birds singing. The fog had returned thicker this time, like smoke that clung to his skin. Jonah made his way back to the tavern, his limbs heavy, his mind dazed. He half expected the building to be gone, to find only ruins or ash. But it was there. Still standing. Still lit from within. When he opened the door, the bell above it gave a familiar chime. But no one looked up. The few patrons sat at their tables, staring into their drinks, unmoving, like mannequins. Even the bartender, usually so warm and talkative, polished the same glass endlessly, his eyes vacant. "Tom," Jonah said. The bartender didn't respond. Jonah stepped closer. Tom's mouth moved, slowly. His voice was a whisper, like leaves brushing stone. "She's not done." "What?" "She followed you." Jonah's stomach turned. He stumbled backward, nearly knocking over a stool. The lights in the tavern flickered. Every person in the room now turned to look at him at the same time. Their eyes were black. Unblinking. Not human. Jonah ran. Out into the fog. Down the street. His lungs burned with cold air as he sprinted past silent homes and empty cars, the world around him flickering like a dying film reel. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. It wasn't just the shadows in the cellar. It wasn't just Illyra. He'd brought something back. The veil had torn. He reached the church at the edge of town and threw open the doors. Inside, it was dark, lit only by the red glow of stained glass windows. A man sat at the altar in a crumpled black coat. Father Marlowe, the village priest. Jonah rushed forward. "You have to help me. Something's wrong. I think I brought something." The priest raised a hand to silence him. "You were warned," he said softly. "What?" "You were the boy who heard the girl's voice, weren't you?" Jonah froze. "I've seen this before," Marlowe said, rising slowly. Generations ago. In whispers. In deaths without cause. In children who vanished into thin air. He stepped closer. They don't just haunt. They infect. Jonah's breath caught. They. The things behind the girl, the priest said. She was a vessel. A gate. Not just cursed but carved to hold something older. Something that doesn't belong here. Jonah's knees buckled. I thought she just needed help. I didn't know. I didn't know she was. She wasn't evil, Marlowe said. But she was a door. And now that it's open. He didn't finish. Instead, he reached under the altar and pulled out a small leather-bound book. The cover was scorched, the pages brittle. This belonged to Reginald Barn, he said. He came here once. With questions. And guilt. He handed the book to Jonah. Inside were drawings, spirals, symbols, notes scrawled in panic. The girl is hearing things I cannot see. The shadows whisper to her. They mimic me now. She is changing. Her eyes don't blink. I found her drawing in languages she was never taught. She doesn't sleep anymore. And neither do they. Jonah closed the book, hands trembling. I sealed the room again, he said. She told me to run. She fought them. Marlowe shook his head. No seal holds forever. Not when someone knows how to find it. A tremor ran through the floor beneath them. Dust drifted down from the rafters. From outside came a strange sound like a chorus of children humming a lullaby in reverse. Jonah's eyes widened. They're already here, aren't they? The priest nodded slowly. We have until sunrise. Maybe. Jonah turned to the stained glass windows. Shadows writhed on the glass, silhouettes of arms and hands and faces pressed against the outside as if reality were just a thin film between dimensions. He looked back to Marlowe. What do we do? We fight, the priest said grimly, with everything we've forgotten. Jonah opened the book again, but this time, something new was written on the last page. Words that hadn't been there moments before. Jonah. Don't forget me. Illyra. He closed his eyes. He wouldn't. Not again. The sky above Eldermoor was wrong. Jonah stood at the church steps, gazing up. It was still dark, but no stars shone overhead. The moon had vanished. In its place hung a pale spiral, turning slowly in the heavens like the eye of a god too old to remember compassion. The wind blew backward now, pulling at his coat like unseen hands urging him to return to Linden House. "Don't look too long," Father Marlowe warned behind him. "They see through it. The more you stare, the closer you draw them." Jonah turned his gaze down, heart thudding. "Father," he said, voice hoarse, "you said we have until sunrise. How do we fight this?" Marlowe didn't answer right away. He lit a candle on the altar and opened Reginald Barnes' journal to a page filled with spirals and symbols. Beneath them, a single sentence stood out in crimson ink. "Only the marked can enter the between. But only love can bring them back." "The between," Marlowe said, tapping the phrase, "is what the old texts call the place beyond the veil. Illyria is still there, Jonah. Part of her. She fought them long enough to save you, but they won't let her go." Jonah stepped closer. "So what do I do?" "You go back in." He blinked. "Back into Linden House?" "No," the priest said. "Further than that. You enter the between." Marlowe pulled a black velvet bag from beneath the altar. From it, he produced an obsidian shard etched with golden lines that shimmered like starlight. "This was forged by a bloodline older than this village," he said. "Use it at the spiral threshold." "The what?" "You'll know it when you see it." Jonah took the shard. It pulsed in his palm, warm and heavy, as if recognizing him. Then the bell tower began to chime 12 slow, deep tolls. Midnight. And outside, the fog parted. The townspeople stood in the streets. Dozens of them. Silent. Unmoving. Their eyes still black, their mouths twitching in unison to a silent chant. "They're part of the hive now," Marlowe said grimly. "If you fail, they'll never come back." Jonah didn't hesitate. He left the church and made his way down the fog-veiled street, passing friends and neighbors whose names he still remembered, now hollow puppets strung together by something unspeakable. They did not move to stop him. The house awaited. When Jonah stepped onto the front porch of Linden House, the door swung open on its own. Inside, everything had changed. The walls bled ink. The floorboards pulsed. And in the center of the parlor floated a spiral, a swirling rift of black and violet light, humming with power. The spiral threshold. Jonah raised the shard. The spiral responded, tightening, focusing, and then with the thunderclap of silence, it sucked him in. He landed in water. Or something like it. Dark. Viscous. Weightless. He was floating not just in space, but in time. Memories flitted past him like ribbons in a current. His childhood. Illyria laughing behind a door. His parents waving goodbye. The moment he opened the cellar lock. And then her voice. Jonah. You came back. He turned. Illyra stood before him, not the ghostly girl of before, but as she had been years ago, 12 years old, barefoot, innocent. But her eyes still shimmered with pain. I'm sorry, he said, and meant it. She nodded. They won't let me go. Not until they take someone in my place. Jonah stepped forward. Take me. She blinked. What? I opened the seal. I led them back. I should pay the price. But the shadows around them stirred, and laughter erupted deep, echoing, inhuman. Foolish flesh, they hissed, voices like tearing silk. You offer what we do not want. A shadow loomed behind Illyra, taking her shape but taller, distorted, a mirror of her pain and rage. The others circled around, forming a vortex of memory and madness. You can't fight them, Illyra whispered. Maybe not, Jonah said, lifting the obsidian shard, but I can trap them. He stabbed the shard into the ground. The between screamed. The light fractured. The shadows shrieked, clawing at the spiral as it began to collapse. Jonah grabbed Illyra's hand. Trust me, he said. She hesitated, then nodded. Together, they leapt. They hit the floor of the Linden House parlor with a thud. The spiral behind them collapsed into itself with a thunderous roar. And then, silence. Jonah sat up. The room was still. Outside, the wind blew normally again. He looked at Illyra. She was alive. Real. Older. No longer a girl but a woman in her 20s, dressed in the white gown she had worn all those years, now glowing faintly under the candlelight. I'm free, she whispered, tears in her eyes. But then her expression changed. You're not, she said. Jonah looked down. A spiral mark was now burned into the center of his chest. The priest was right. He had gone into the between. And now, something had followed him back. The next morning, Elder Moore awakened with the sun. Birdsong returned. The fog dissolved. The sky once again wore a pale blue veil as if nothing had happened. But Jonah knew better. He stood at the cracked window of Linden House, shirt unbuttoned, gazing at the spiral mark etched into the skin over his heart. It didn't ache. It pulsed. Not painfully, but persistently, like a second heartbeat, one that wasn't entirely his. Behind him, Illyra sat on the floor near the cold hearth, her arms wrapped around her knees. She hadn't spoken much since their return from the between. Her eyes flicked toward shadows too often. Her voice stayed hushed. And sometimes, Jonah swore she was listening to voices he couldn't hear. But she was alive. Real. Human again. He turned toward her. You need rest. I don't sleep, she said softly. Not anymore. Not since I was taken. Jonah hesitated. What was it like? Illyra didn't answer at first. Then, without looking at him, she whispered, it's a place where time devours itself. Where memory isn't yours anymore. Where thought becomes sound, and sound becomes shadow. She finally looked up. And you brought a piece of it back with you. Jonah said nothing. She pointed to his chest. That mark. It's not just a scar. It's a gate. That evening, they went back to Father Marlowe. The church was quiet, but the old man had prepared for their visit. Candles lined the altar, and ancient books lay open on the pews. I felt the rupture close, he said when he saw them. The seal's holding. For now. It came with me, Jonah replied, opening his shirt. The priest's expression darkened. They always marked their anchor, he muttered. They can't pass through without a bridge. And now you are that bridge. Illyra stepped forward. Is there a way to sever it? Marlowe frowned. Not without consequence. Removing the mark may kill him. Or worse, rip open the veil again. Jonah gritted his teeth. Then what do I do? The priest hesitated. You hold it. You contain it. You don't leave the village. You don't dream. You don't feel. Because anything that makes your mind weaker could let them back in. That night, Jonah tried to sleep. But sleep did not come. Instead, the moment he closed his eyes, he saw spirals, countless, endless spirals, each one turning in opposite directions, like maelstroms of memory and void. And in the center of each spiral, a face stared back. Sometimes it was Illyra. Sometimes it was him. Other times, it was something else. When he woke up, if waking was even possible, he was drenched in sweat, the spiral on his chest glowing faintly in the dark. Illyra sat beside his bed, watching him. I heard them again, she said. He sat up. What did they say? They're searching for new hosts. New thresholds. He swallowed hard. Outside the village. She nodded. And that's when the knock came at the door. Jonah stood, heartbeat racing. Illyra vanished into the hallway shadows like a wraith. He opened the door. A woman stood there drenched in sweat, clutching a phone to her ear, her mascara running down her cheeks. She looked exhausted. Terrified. Familiar. Alice. Jonah whispered. What are you doing here? She dropped the phone. I drove all night. Something's wrong. Alice. His ex-fiancée. The woman he left behind when he returned to Eldermoor. You called me, she said. Jonah shook his head. I didn't. Her eyes widened. Yes. You did. You said you needed help. That you found a girl. That something was coming. I recorded the call. She reached into her coat, fumbling with her phone. She pressed play. Jonah's voice came through, only it wasn't him. Come home, Alice, it said, voice distorted, like something being pulled through water. Come home. Bring the child. Jonah froze. Alice put a trembling hand on her stomach. I'm pregnant, Jonah, she whispered. The mark on Jonah's chest burned like fire. Behind him, Illyra whispered from the shadows. It's not over. The rest of that night passed like a blur. Father Marlowe returned and inspected Alice. She was unmarked, untouched. But Jonah could see it in her eyes. Something followed her. Something invisible. Something whispering. It's not just after me now, he told Marlowe. It's looking for a new gate. The priest nodded. A child born of someone already touched. That's ideal for them. Pure. Open. Alice was furious. You said nothing about this when you left. What is this town? What happened to you? Jonah couldn't answer. How do you explain to someone that you've become a doorway? Marlowe made a decision. You need to take her to the monastery, he said. Far north. In the highlands. They have relics. Seals. Knowledge older than any priesthood left standing. Jonah looked at Alice. I can't leave, he said. If I do. The mark goes with you, Illyra finished. For the first time in years, Alice took his hand. Then I'm not leaving without you. Jonah met her gaze. For a moment, the spiral stopped pulsing. And that's when he knew. There was one way left to fight this. Not to seal the spiral, but to reverse it. To find the center. To descend into the very origin of the between. And destroy it from inside. The road north was merciless. Jonah drove the battered old van through winding mountain passes shrouded in mist and shadow. Alice sat beside him, her hand resting protectively over her growing belly. Illyra was silent in the back seat, eyes scanning the passing trees like a hunter born of darkness and light. The highlands loomed ahead, a land of jagged cliffs, ancient stones, and whispers that the wind carried for centuries. Jonah's chest ached. The spiral mark throbbed beneath his shirt, a constant reminder of the world now tangled within him. Each pulse felt like a call to a place he dared not know. Alice finally broke the silence. "I'm scared," she confessed, voice trembling. "What if this thing inside you reaches the baby?" Jonah glanced at her. "We won't let it?" Illyria spoke then, voice soft yet firm. "The baby is the key," she said. "More than a gate, a beginning or an end. We must reach the monastery before the spiral spreads." Night fell as they reached the edge of the village where the monastery stood, an ancient fortress carved from stone and time itself. Its walls were etched with sigils glowing faintly in the moonlight, symbols older than Elder Moor. They were greeted by Sister Miriam, an elderly nun whose eyes gleamed with both wisdom and warning. "You carry the mark," she said, scanning Jonah carefully. Jonah nodded. "Come. The abbot awaits." Inside the monastery's grand hall, the abbot, a tall man draped in robes embroidered with silver thread, stood beside a massive circular stone inscribed with countless spirals. "This," he said, "is the heart of the monastery's power, the spiral seal. It binds the between to this world, but it weakens with each passing generation." He turned to Jonah. "The mark you carry is a shard of that seal, fractured when you opened the door. To heal it, you must enter the spiral chamber." Jonah swallowed. "And what happens there?" The abbot's eyes darkened. "You face the origin of the between. A place where reality fractures and memories dissolve. Few have returned." Illyria stepped forward. "I've been there. I barely escaped." Alice tightened her grip on Jonah's arm. The abbot nodded toward a spiral-shaped stone stairway winding down into the earth beneath the monastery. "This is your path. You must journey inside, find the core of the between, and mend the seal." Before Jonah could respond, the monastery doors slammed open. A cold wind rushed in, carrying voices, whispers filled with malice. Outside, figures cloaked in shadows advanced, their presence corrupting the very air. "They've followed you," Sister Miriam said, fear flickering in her eyes. Jonah felt the spiral on his chest flare violently. The battle for the monastery and the fate of both worlds was about to begin. The ancient monastery trembled beneath a sky swirling with unnatural storms. Jonah stood at the entrance of the spiral chamber, heart pounding like thunder in his chest. Behind him, Alice and Illyria prepared defenses alongside Sister Miriam and the abbot, chanting prayers older than memory itself. The flickering torchlight cast grotesque shadows across stone walls carved with spirals and sigils, glowing faintly with celestial energy. Outside, the shadow creatures gathered in a relentless wave, their whispers rising into a deafening roar that rattled windows and shook the very earth beneath their feet. Jonah clenched the obsidian shard in his hand, its golden etchings pulsating rhythmically as if alive and aware. He took a deep breath and stepped down the spiral stone stairs. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and ancient power. Each step deeper into the chamber felt like slipping further from reality itself. As he reached the bottom, a vast cavern unfolded before him, walls alive with twisting spirals of light and darkness, weaving together like a tapestry of cosmic madness. At the cavern's heart pulsed a vortex, the core of the between, a swirling portal of shadow and flame. Jonah approached cautiously. Suddenly, from the darkness, a figure emerged, tall and regal, cloaked in robes woven from starfire and shadow. Her eyes gleamed like twin moons, infinite and terrifying. "Welcome, bearer of the mark," she intoned, voice echoing like a cathedral bell. Jonah froze. "It is you who fractured the seal," she said, stepping forward. "You and the girl who followed." Illyria stepped beside Jonah, her gaze steady despite the immense power radiating from the entity. "I am Seraphim," the figure continued. "Guardian of the between, keeper of the spiral. And you have disrupted the balance." Jonah swallowed. "I'm here to fix what I broke." Seraphine's smile was cold. "The between is not meant to be fixed. It is the space between worlds, a necessary chaos. But you have invited destruction." The vortex pulsed wildly, tendrils of darkness reaching toward Jonah, testing his will. With a roar, he raised the obsidian shard, shouting, "I will not let this destroy my world." A battle erupted, light against shadow, order against chaos. Jonah's sword of light clashed with Seraphine's shadowy tendrils, each strike sending shockwaves through the chamber. Illyria summoned bursts of radiant energy, her spiral mark glowing fiercely, repelling the dark forces. As they fought, visions flooded Jonah's mind, memories not his own, centuries of guardians who had failed, sacrifices etched into the fabric of time. He saw children trapped between worlds, souls crying for release. He understood then this was not just a battle for Elder Moor, but for the fate of all realities tethered by the spiral seal. Summoning every ounce of strength, Jonah plunged the shard into the vortex's center. A blinding explosion of light and sound filled the chamber. When the radiance faded, Seraphine was gone. The vortex sealed. Jonah collapsed, breathing heavily, the mark on his chest now dim and faint. Illyria knelt beside him, whispering, "You did it. The seal is whole." But Jonah knew the war was far from over. Outside, the first rays of dawn pierced the monastery's stained glass, casting spirals of color across the stone floor, a reminder that balance was fragile, and vigilance eternal. The first light of dawn filtered through the ancient stained glass windows of the monastery, painting the stone floor with fractured rainbows. Jonah lay sprawled on the cold ground, the faint glow of the spiral mark on his chest now barely perceptible. Illyria sat beside him, her eyes reflecting the soft hues of morning, but her expression was far from peaceful. The chamber was silent. Too silent. Jonah's breath came in shallow gasps. The battle had drained him of strength, but the weight pressing upon his soul was far heavier. "Illyra," he whispered, struggling to sit up. "Is it really over?" She looked at him, her gaze both tender and distant. "The seal is mended, yes. But the mark remains. It will always be a part of you." Jonah's fingers traced the faint spiral on his chest, feeling its coolness beneath his skin. "What does that mean for us?" "For me?" Illyra took a deep breath, her voice trembling slightly. "It means the between still watches. It is patient. It waits for cracks to form again. And you are its beacon." Before Jonah could respond, the heavy wooden doors of the chamber creaked open. Father Marlowe and Sister Miriam entered, their faces grave. "We have little time," Marlowe said. "The monastery is no longer safe. The darkness you battled has stirred the world beyond. Shadows are spreading." Illyra rose, determination flashing in her eyes. "Then we must leave." Jonah nodded, pushing himself to his feet despite the lingering pain. Outside, the monastery grounds were shrouded in an unnatural mist. The villagers, once their friends and neighbors, moved through the fog like phantoms, their eyes vacant, bodies guided by an unseen force. Alice appeared from the mist, clutching her belly. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with fierce resolve. "We must protect the child," she said urgently. "The mark's influence grows stronger every day." Jonah reached for her hand, feeling the warmth despite the cold air. "We'll keep it safe. Together." As they prepared to leave Elder Moor, Illyra paused, looking back at the monastery one last time. "There is more to learn," she said softly. "The spiral seal is only a fragment of a greater whole, an ancient pact forgotten by time." Jonah's brow furrowed. "What pact?" Illyra's gaze darkened. "A bond between our world and the between, a fragile balance maintained by those willing to sacrifice everything. The battle we fought was but a prelude." Suddenly, a sharp cry pierced the mist. From the shadows emerged a figure cloaked, masked, and wielding a staff inscribed with glowing runes. "I have come for the mark," the stranger declared. "For it belongs to the between, and it will return." Jonah stepped forward, readying himself. Illyra whispered, "The true test begins." The air in the monastery's courtyard crackled with tension as the cloaked stranger stepped forward, staff glowing ominously beneath the waning moonlight. His mask was carved from ancient bone, adorned with twisting spirals that seemed to shift and writhe as if alive. Jonah tightened his grip on the obsidian shard, the spiral mark on his chest flaring painfully in response to the stranger's presence. Alice instinctively moved closer, shielding her belly, while Illyra's eyes narrowed with a fierce light, ready to defend what remained. The stranger's voice echoed cold and sharp. "You carry what belongs to the between. The spiral mark is a key, and it must be reclaimed before the balance is lost." Illyra stepped forward, voice steady but laced with fire. You speak of balance, but what you bring is chaos. We fought to protect the worlds, not surrender them. The stranger laughed a hollow, chilling sound. Protection. You are naive. The between feeds on imbalance. It demands passage. And I am its servant. Jonah's mind raced. Who was this figure? A guardian? A harbinger? Or something far darker? Suddenly, with a flick of his staff, the courtyard shifted, reality bending and twisting. Shadows poured from cracks in the stone, forming serpentine tendrils that lashed toward Jonah and his companions. Illyra chanted ancient words, summoning a shield of radiant light. The tendrils hissed but recoiled from the barrier. Alice whispered a prayer, clutching her unborn child tighter. Jonah lunged forward, shard raised. The battle had begun. As steel met shadow, Jonah felt a surge of power within him, the spiral mark awakening. Memories not his own flooded his consciousness, rituals performed by forgotten cults, pacts forged in blood, the very essence of the between twisting in endless loops of time. In the heat of combat, Illyra called out, Jonah, the seal, it's incomplete. There is another part hidden deep within the wellspring cavern. Jonah's breath hitched. Where? Beyond the mountains, where the earth bleeds crystal and time folds upon itself. The stranger snarled, summoning a vortex of darkness. If you seek the wellspring, you will not find it alive. With a final burst of strength, Jonah shattered one of the shadow tendrils, then looked to Alice and Illyra. We have no choice. We must reach the wellspring before he does. Together, they fled the monastery, the mask seekers' curses echoing behind them like thunder. The journey to Wellspring Cavern tested them beyond limits. They traversed jagged cliffs and frozen rivers, each step shadowed by creeping darkness that sought to consume them. Along the way, Alice's condition worsened, the spiral mark's influence reaching into her very soul. Illyra revealed secrets long buried. The wellspring was the origin point of the spiral seal, a nexus where worlds converged and where the fate of the between could be rewritten. Jonah wrestled with the growing power inside him, a force that threatened to consume his identity, to drag him into the void forever. At the cavern's mouth, they faced the final trial, a guardian born of stone and shadow, testing their worthiness to enter. With courage and sacrifice, they passed. Inside the wellspring, the air shimmered with raw energy, the source of all spirals, all marks, all veils between worlds. Jonah stepped forward, shard in hand, ready to face destiny. The wellspring cavern pulsed with a light unlike any Jonah had ever seen, an ethereal glow that shimmered between worlds, a dance of colors and shadows folding into one another. The air was thick with ancient power, humming softly as if the very fabric of reality held its breath. Jonah stood at the cavern's core, the obsidian shard in his hand resonating with the pulse beneath his skin, the spiral mark that had shaped his destiny. Beside him, Illyra and Alice steadied themselves, each bearing their own scars from the long journey. The mask seeker appeared behind a veil of shadow, his bone mask cracking slightly under the cavern's radiant glow. "This ends here," Jonah said firmly, stepping forward. The stranger's voice was a hiss. "You cannot undo the spiral's path. It was woven into existence long before you walked this earth." Jonah raised the shard, which flared brilliantly. "No," he said. "The spiral can be broken. Not by destruction, but by understanding." Suddenly, the cavern trembled. Time seemed to ripple, and visions flooded Jonah's mind, memories of ancient keepers, sacrifices made to bind the between, and the true nature of the spiral seal. It was not a prison, but a bridge. A connection between worlds meant to be balanced, not severed. He saw Illyra not just as a victim or vessel, but as a guardian, a soul who had carried the weight of worlds on her shoulders, waiting for the right moment to restore harmony. With clarity, Jonah reached out, pressing the obsidian shard against the cavern's heart, the core of the spiral seal. Light burst forth in spirals, weaving into patterns of intricate beauty and power. The mark on Jonah's chest pulsed in harmony, spreading warmth through his veins. The mask seeker lunged, but was caught in the spiraling light, his shadowy form unraveling like mist before the dawn. "Illyra," Jonah said, turning to her. She smiled, radiant, whole. "It's time to heal." Alice stepped forward, placing a hand over her belly. "The child," she whispered. "The future." Together, they channeled the cavern's power, the spiral mark becoming a beacon of unity, mending the rift between worlds. A brilliant light enveloped them, and the between's chaotic storm calmed, folding back into balance. When the light faded, they stood in the wellspring cavern transformed. The spiral mark was gone. The seal was whole. Jonah felt free. Illyra was free. Alice's child would be born into a world where the veil was no longer torn. Outside the cavern, the sun rose over Elder Moor, casting golden light on a village reborn. The shadows had retreated. But Jonah knew the spiral's lesson would never fade. Balance required sacrifice. And they had paid the price. Title: The Spiral Mark, A Journey Between Worlds. Description: In the quiet village of Elder Moor, a haunted house conceals a terrifying secret, a gateway to a dimension known as the Between. Jonah Carrick, marked by a mysterious spiral burned into his chest, must confront ancient shadows and unravel forgotten pacts to protect his loved ones and restore balance between worlds. Joined by Illyra, a girl trapped between reality and darkness, and Alice, his past love, carrying their unborn child, Jonah embarks on a perilous journey through time, memory, and sacrifice. Will they seal the rift or become lost to the spiral's eternal grasp?